Okay, it is Friedo, and as you can tell by my hair, if you're watching on video, I have been working to have some headphone hair going on right now, but I want to take a break and talk to you guys a little bit about marketing. Look, I'm not going to pretend that I'm some marketing expert because I'm not, okay? But being in radio for as long as I was, and specifically working for brand names like The Ticket in Dallas and ESPN, I got to know enough to be dangerous about marketing, especially ESPN, because ESPN is all about research and knowing what their consumers want and figuring out what the audience is going to tune in for, what makes them tune in and what makes them tune out. So I know enough to be dangerous. I participated in all of those focus groups, and I actually was the type that I loved going up to Bristol and going into the management meetings. Most people didn't like doing that because they can be tedious, they can be boring, but I loved getting all that information and learning what makes people tick. And I'm going to just tell you this, I'll give ESPN a huge compliment. They know what their audience wants. The Ticket the same way here in Dallas. The Ticket radio station, we knew what our audience wanted, and they continue to be incredibly successful because they deliver on what their audience wants. And that's mostly what marketing is. You know, give your client, give your customer, give them what they want, and they'll keep coming back. So I want to talk about marketing in a way that you can use podcasts to market your product. And let me just, start by saying this. As I said, I'm not really an expert on marketing, but I am an expert on myself. And I know what it takes to market to me. And I think that I represent a lot of people out there. And where I'm going with this is I'm a creature of habit. It is hard to get me to try something new. It's very hard to get me to go to a new restaurant or to go to a new grocery store or to do something that I just generally have not done in the past. You've got to give me a special reason to do that. And I think that there's lots of cases where it's probably the same way with you. For example, I'll tell you the truth. I've had the same breakfast for the last 90 days in a row. It's a breakfast burrito from a gas station. And I've had it every single day for the last 3 months. And it's good. Don't get me wrong. It's good. But it's the same every day because I'm a creature of habit. I don't want to make that decision on what am I going to eat this morning. I like to have that decision already made. And I'll use, Jason Garrett, former Cowboys head coach, as a real good example of this. The Cowboys were training at training camp in San Antonio one year. And it became very clear that the head coach of the Cowboys at the time, Jason Garrett, was wearing the same exact outfit every single day. So after about a week or two, someone asked him, hey, are those the same clothes you wore yesterday? Or do you have a closet full of the same golf shirts and the same pants? And Jason said, yeah, I wear the same thing every day. And yeah, I have a closet full of the same exact golf shirt. And the reason he gave, which I thought was genius, he said, look, it's not that important of a decision. And it keeps me from having to make one decision in the morning. I know exactly what I'm going to wear. I don't have to think about it. And that's one fewer decision that I have to make. And I can save that thought process for the important decisions I have to make. And that's kind of where I'm at, okay? I don't mind making decisions, but I want to make decisions on things that really matter, not on my breakfast, okay? That's an automatic for me. So it is really hard to market to someone like me because you've got to give me a reason to change that routine. And I will tell you this also, being a member of a chamber of commerce and several networking groups, I've experienced this firsthand where I would never walk into some of these businesses if I wasn't given the reason that, okay, I just met this new member of the chamber. He just opened up this new restaurant. I'm going to go try it. That's me getting prodded along to go try something new. There are plenty of places that I've gone to that I've ended up really, really liking, but I would never, ever set foot in that business if I wasn't prodded along to do it. And I think that's a challenge that a lot of small business owners have. They've got a great service. They've got a great product. They provide incredible customer service. And by the way, most small business owners do provide great customer service. They really, truly appreciate the business and they're passionate about serving their clients. But their big challenge is getting the message out, letting people know, hey, change your routine and come to my store. Change your routine and use my service. Change your routine and try me out. Because I know once you try me out, I'm going to win you over. So the big challenge is getting people to change their routines and to try your product or your service or your business location. And that's where the podcasts and marketing through podcasts can really, really help you out. I'm going to give you 5 advantages today of advertising on a podcast. And I'm not telling you that you have to do your own podcast. Okay, as a matter of fact, this is one of the few episodes I'll do where I'm not going to encourage you. Well, I will still encourage you to do your own podcast, but I'm going to tell you that you can still accomplish your goal without doing your own podcast. The 5 advantages of advertising on someone else's podcast. First of all, when you advertise on someone else's podcast, you are using their spheres of influence. You're leveraging their followers on social media. The host of that podcast, the podcast guest on that episode, they're going to promote that out to their social media following. So you are getting your product, your service promoted in areas that you would never get it promoted if you didn't advertise on that podcast. You also have a very highly engaged audience when you advertise on a podcast. And what I'm saying is, unlike radio, and you've done this as a radio listener or a TV viewer, once the commercial starts, you're likely to go look to see what else is on another station. You'll leave that radio station. You'll leave that if you're watching live TV. You'll leave that TV show to go see what else is on. Podcast listeners don't do that. For the most part, podcast listeners, they will listen to the majority of the podcast. And when I say majority, the number is 80% of the podcast. So if someone takes the time to start listening, they're going to listen to at least 80% on average. So you've got a very highly engaged audience that will hear your message. Podcasts are also aimed at a very targeted audience. So if you've got a product or a service that is very targeted, a podcast is a perfect place for you to promote your business. The example I'll use here is if you're a home inspector, if you sell home owners insurance, find a realtor who's doing a podcast that's dedicated to home buyers and advertise on that podcast because you're reaching the audience, that targeted audience that you want to reach. Someone who is listening to a podcast about buying a home probably doesn't already have home owner's insurance. Is probably going to be in need of a handyman, be in need of services that they haven't needed before. And so now you get to take advantage of that realtor's audience and advertise on their podcast, and you get to reach your targeted demo. The other thing about these podcasts, they give you a lot of freedom and creativity, lots of flexibility for you to be creative. And the reason for that is multifold. First of all, the people who host the podcasts, they're the ones that make up the rules. They're going to appreciate the fact that you want to take the time to sponsor their podcast, and they're going to do everything they can to make sure that you are pleased with the services they're giving you. Okay? So not only can they make up the rules, they want to see you succeed because the more you succeed, the more they're going to succeed, and you're going to renew as a sponsor of that podcast. So you've got freedom, you've got flexibility. I like to tell all of my clients that are doing podcasts, look, we make the rules. People ask me, well, how long should a podcast go? What's the length of a good podcast? Well, there's no hard, set, and fast rule. We get to decide that. We get to choose the sponsors. We get to choose how we promote the sponsor. So that's a great advantage to a business that wants to take advantage of sponsoring a podcast. The other one that I think a lot of people don't think about is there's no expiration date. When you advertise on a podcast, your advertisement, your message will stay up as long as we decide to keep that podcast episode alive. There's no expiration date. Okay. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't advertise in print, but I'm going to use print and radio and TV as examples where there is actually an expiration date, because when you advertise on radio, especially, you are hoping that your consumer hears your message when it is played live on the air, and that's the one chance you get. Because once it's played, you don't get to go back and play it again. Okay? Magazines, print. You're hoping that someone opens that magazine, if you're advertising in it, and they read the magazine long enough to get to where your advertisement is, or they randomly open it up to your advertisement. And what happens to those magazines after a month or so, or when the next one comes out? That magazine will get thrown away. So there is an expiration date. Podcast stays online until we decide to take it offline. And quite frankly, most podcasters don't bother taking episodes offline, because most podcasts are meant to be evergreen, which means whether you're listening in 2022, 2023, 2032, the content's still going to be usable and fresh for an audience that hasn't heard it yet. So podcasters generally don't take their episodes offline. They stay online for eternity, which may be a little bit of a stretch, but you know what I'm saying. And I don't even want to bring this up, but I'm going to anyway. The other advantage is the cost. Advertising on podcast, the cost is so low. I mean, I've got packages that start at $75 a month. To me, that's a no-brainer. To me, for $75 a month, everyone should be advertising on one of the podcasts that come out of my studio, because it's going to be effective. It's going to get a return on investment probably much higher than the $75 that you are investing. And when you look at the alternatives, advertising on a podcast, especially out of my studios, you're not going to find a better deal. You're just not going to. Now, the reason I didn't want to bring it up is, well, I think it's a good reason to advertise on podcasts, that low cost. I don't think it's the best, because the best reasons are the ones I gave before the low cost. Because the truth of the matter is, if I'm delivering on the previous four things I talked about, the cost shouldn't really matter that much to you, because you're going to see a return. And an example I'll use is some of these networking groups that I've joined, they cost a fortune. And, you know, I've had to think about, is it really worth me joining this networking group? And everyone I've joined, and I've decided to pay that small fortune, you know, which is all relative, but I've joined because I'm getting a good return on investment. So it makes it worthwhile to overpay to be a part of that networking group, because I know I'm going to get a return. Same thing with these podcasts. Yeah, it's a low cost. It's going to make it a lot easier for you to justify the expense. It's going to make it a lot easier for you to get a good return on your investment. But the truth of the matter is, at any cost, if you're getting a good return, that's a no-brainer. So you've got 5 advantages right there. If you don't want to host your own podcast, take advantage of other people's ability to host. Leverage their networks to promote your business. Get people to change their habits by delivering your message about your product, your service, your business on someone else's podcast. If you want to reach out to me, I love to talk to people. 214-250-1321 is my phone number. Or just go to FriedoNation.com. That's FRIEDO Nation.com. I give free consultations And I learn as much from you as you can learn from me. So I really look forward to talking to you.